Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our podcast. I'm Sarah, and today Mike and I are beginning a new series where we'll explore the 7 natural wonders of the world. These are some of Earth's most spectacular natural sights that showcase our planet's incredible beauty and power.
That's right, Sarah. After talking about our travels through Vietnam, China, and Thailand, we've received many requests to discuss other amazing places around the world. The 7 natural wonders are a perfect place to start because they represent some of the most breathtaking sights our planet has to offer.
Exactly. And today, we're starting with one of the most magical natural phenomena on Earth, the Aurora Borealis, commonly known as the Northern Lights. Mike, I know you've been lucky enough to see them in person. What was that experience like?
It was truly life-changing, Sarah. I remember standing in the snow in northern Finland, looking up at the dark sky, when suddenly these green lights began to dance across the stars. At first, they were faint, almost like a wispy cloud, but then they grew stronger, with ribbons of green and pink light swirling and pulsing overhead. I actually had tears in my eyes because it was so beautiful.
That sounds incredible. I still have the Northern Lights on my bucket list. For our listeners who might not be familiar, can you explain what exactly the Northern Lights are?
Of course, the northern lights are essentially a natural light display in the sky, primarily seen in high-latitude regions around the Arctic Circle. They're caused by disturbances in the magnetosphere, that's the region of space controlled by Earth's magnetic field caused by solar wind. These disturbances are known as geomagnetic storms.
So they're connected to activity on the sun.
Exactly, the sun constantly releases streams of charged particles called solar wind. When these particles reach Earth, they interact with gases in our atmosphere, particularly oxygen and nitrogen. This interaction causes the gases to glow, creating those beautiful curtains of light that we see dancing in the sky.
That's fascinating. And is that why they appear in different colors?
Yes, the different colors are caused by different types of gas particles colliding with the charged particles from the sun. The most common color is green, which happens when the charged particles collide with oxygen molecules about 60 miles above Earth. Pink or red auroras occur when the particles hit oxygen at higher altitudes, around 200 miles up. Blue or purple lights happen when the particles hit nitrogen in the atmosphere.
I've seen photos with all of those colors together. It must be breathtaking in person. Where are the best places in the world to see the Northern Lights?
The northern lights are primarily visible in what's called the Aurora Oval, an area that circles the magnetic North Pole. This includes northern parts of Canada, Alaska, Greenland, Iceland, Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Russia. I've personally seen them in Tromsø, Norway, and in Rovaniemi, Finland, which are both popular destinations for aurora viewing.
What about the Southern Hemisphere? Can you see auroras there too?
Absolutely, in the southern hemisphere they're called aurora australis or southern lights. They're equally beautiful, but less frequently observed simply because there's less land mass in the right locations to view them. The best places to see the southern lights are southern Tasmania in Australia, New Zealand's southern island, and Antarctica, though that's obviously challenging to reach.
I imagine timing is important too, both in terms of seasons and time of day. When is the best time to see the auroras?
You're right about timing being crucial. You need dark, clear skies, so the best time is during winter months when nights are longest. In the northern hemisphere, that's roughly September to March. You also want to avoid full moons if possible, as the moonlight can make the auroras harder to see. As for time of day, auroras are most active between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m., though they can occur anytime during dark hours.
And I imagine weather plays a big role too.
Definitely, clear skies are essential, which can be challenging in winter when many northern locations have frequent cloud cover. This is why many people recommend planning a stay of at least 3-4 nights in an aurora zone to increase your chances of having at least one night with clear skies.
Can you tell us about your experience in Finland? How did you plan that trip?
I planned my Finland trip specifically around seeing the northern lights. I went in February, which has cold but often stable weather in Finnish Lapland. I stayed in Rovaniemi for 3 nights, and then further north in Inari for another 3 nights to maximize my chances. The first 2 nights were cloudy, and I started to worry that I wouldn't see them at all.
That must have been disappointing after traveling so far.
It was getting a bit stressful, but on the third night, the clouds cleared. I'd booked an Aurora hunting tour with a local guide who took our small group away from the city lights to a frozen lake. We waited for about an hour, drinking hot chocolate and sitting around a campfire, when suddenly someone shouted and pointed up. At first, it just looked like a faint green cloud, but over the next hour, it developed into an incredible display.
What was it like emotionally? I've heard people say it's a profound experience.
It really was. There's something deeply moving about seeing such beauty in the natural world. The lights seem alive, they pulse and flow, brighten and fade, change shape and color. Sometimes they look like curtains blowing in the wind, sometimes like spotlights, and other times they ripple across the entire sky. The silence of the winter landscape around us added to the feeling that we were witnessing something special and almost magical.
Did you try to photograph the northern lights? I've heard that can be challenging.
It is challenging. I had a basic DSLR camera and a tripod, which are essential because you need long exposure shots to capture the lights well. My first attempts were terrible, just dark photos with maybe a green smudge. But our guide helped me adjust the settings, and eventually I got some decent shots. Nothing like what professional photographers capture, but enough to show friends and family back home.
What settings work best for photographing the auroras?
You need manual settings with a high ISO. I was using between 1600 and 3200, and a wide aperture, which is a small f number like f2.8 or f4. Then you need a slow shutter speed, somewhere between 5 to 30 seconds depending on how bright and active the lights are. And of course, a sturdy tripod is absolutely necessary, because any camera movement during those long exposures will blur the image.
That sounds complicated for a beginner photographer.
It definitely has a learning curve. That's one reason why joining a photography tour can be helpful. The guides are usually skilled at Aurora photography and can help you with your camera settings. Many tours even provide professional photos as part of the package, so you can just enjoy the experience without worrying about capturing it yourself.
Beyond Finland and Norway, where else have you researched for viewing the northern lights?
Iceland is another extremely popular destination. It has the advantage of being more accessible for travelers from North America and Europe with relatively short flights. The small town of Husavik in northern Iceland is famous for aurora viewing, as is Thingvellir National Park not far from Reykjavik. In North America, Fairbanks, Alaska is considered one of the best places because it's under the aurora oval and has relatively stable winter weather. Churchill in Manitoba, Canada is also excellent. It's known for polar bears in the fall and northern lights in winter.
Those all sound like cold winter destinations. Is there any way to see the northern lights without braving extreme cold?
That's a great question. While winter offers longer hours of darkness, which improves your chances, you can sometimes see the auroras in late September or early October or in March, when temperatures aren't quite as extreme. In places like Iceland, winter temperatures are often milder than you might expect, typically around freezing rather than the deep cold you'd find in Finland or Canada. There are also more comfortable viewing options now. Many hotels in aurora zones offer special glass-roofed cabins or igloos where you can watch the lights from your warm bed. And in places like Tromsø, Norway, you can sometimes see the lights from the city itself, though they're usually more vibrant away from light pollution.
Those glass igloos sound amazing. I've seen photos of them on social media. Are they as wonderful as they look?
They're definitely a unique experience. I spent one night in a glass igloo in Kakslatainen in Finnish Lapland. The entire roof is transparent, so you're lying in a warm, comfortable bed while looking up at the stars, and if you're lucky, the northern lights. The igloos are quite small, just room for a bed and maybe a small bathroom, but the experience is unforgettable.
Were you lucky enough to see the auroras from your igloo?
I saw a faint display for about 30 minutes. It wasn't as spectacular as what I'd seen on the Aurora hunting tour, but there was something magical about watching it from bed, all cozy while the temperature outside was about degrees C minus 4 degrees F. The downside is that these special accommodations are very expensive and book up months or even a year in advance.
I can imagine. Let's talk about the cultural significance of the Northern Lights. I know many indigenous peoples in Arctic regions have traditional beliefs about what causes them.
Yes, the auroras have inspired myths and legends across many cultures. The Sami people, who are indigenous to northern Scandinavia and Russia, traditionally believed that the lights were the energies of the souls of the departed. In Finland, there was a belief that the lights were caused by the fiery fox running so quickly across the snow that its tail caused sparks to fly into the sky, which is why the Finnish name for the northern lights translates to fox fires.
That's a beautiful image. What about other cultures?
In North America, some Inuit groups believed that the lights represented the souls of animals they hunted, like seals, salmon, and deer. The Menominee Indians of Wisconsin believed they were the torches of friendly giants who lived in the north and were fishing at night. Not all interpretations were positive, though. In some Norse legends, the auroras were thought to be reflections from the shields and armor of the Valkyries, female warriors who chose who would die in battle. And in some parts of Europe, the lights were seen as a bad omen, potentially predicting war or famine.
It's fascinating how different cultures interpreted this natural phenomenon before science could explain it. When did scientists begin to understand what really causes the northern lights?
The scientific understanding of auroras developed gradually. In the 17th century, astronomers like Galileo Galilei and Pierre Gassendi used the term Aurora Borealis, with Aurora being the Roman goddess of dawn and Borealis referring to the north wind. But they didn't understand the mechanism behind the lights. The connection to magnetism was first suggested in the 18th century, when scientists noticed that compass needles were disturbed during aurora displays. But it wasn't until the late 19th and early 20th centuries that scientists like Christian Birkeland, a Norwegian physicist, began to develop theories about electrical currents from the sun interacting with Earth's magnetic field.
And now we understand them quite well, right?
We do, though there are still aspects that scientists are researching. We now know that auroras are caused by solar storms, massive eruptions of charged particles from the sun's surface that travel through space and interact with Earth's magnetic field and atmosphere. These storms can happen anytime, but they follow an 11-year solar cycle, with some years having much more solar activity than others.
Does that mean there are better years to try to see the northern lights?
Yes, the solar cycle definitely affects aurora activity. Solar maximum is when the sun is most active, producing more solar flares and coronal mass ejections that can cause strong auroras. The last solar maximum was around 2014, and the next one is predicted for around 2024-2025, so the next few years should be excellent for aurora viewing.
That's good to know for planning purposes. Is there any way to predict when the lights will be visible on a specific night?
There are several aurora forecast websites and apps that predict activity 1-3 days in advance. They use data from satellites that monitor the sun and solar wind to predict when and where auroras might be visible. They typically use what's called the KP index, which ranges from 0 to 9, with higher numbers indicating stronger geomagnetic activity and better chances of seeing auroras at lower latitudes.
So a higher KP number means better aurora displays.
Generally, yes, though even with a lower KP index of 2 or 3, you can still see impressive displays if you're far enough north. With a KP index of 5 or higher, auroras can sometimes be visible at much lower latitudes than usual, occasionally even in the northern United States or Central Europe, though usually they're fainter in these locations.
Have there been any famous historical aurora events?
Yes, there have been some remarkable events throughout history. One of the most famous occurred in 1859, known as the Carrington event after the astronomer who observed it. This was an extremely powerful solar storm that created auroras visible as far south as the Caribbean. The lights were so bright that people in the northeastern U.S. could read newspapers by their light at night.
That's incredible. Could something like that happen again?
It could, and scientists are actually concerned about the impact. such an event would have today. In 1859, the most advanced technology affected was the telegraph system, which in some cases continued working even when disconnected from power sources because of the electrical currents induced by the geomagnetic storm. Today, a storm of that magnitude could potentially damage power grids, satellites, and communication systems.
That sounds concerning. Are there any efforts to protect against such events?
Yes, space weather forecasting has become increasingly important. NASA, NOAA, and other space agencies monitor the sun constantly for solar flares and coronal mass ejections that could cause geomagnetic storms. This gives some warning time, typically 1–3 days, before the charged particles reach Earth, allowing satellite operators and power companies to take protective measures.
Let's return to the experience of seeing the auroras as a traveler. Besides the lights themselves, what else can visitors enjoy in these northern destinations?
That's a great question. These destinations offer many winter activities that complement aurora viewing. In Finland and Lapland, you can try dog sledding, which is an exhilarating experience being pulled through snowy forests by a team of enthusiastic huskies. Reindeer sleigh rides are another traditional option, more peaceful than dog sledding but equally memorable.
Those sound wonderful. What about other winter activities?
Snowmobiling is popular in most northern locations. It's a fun way to cover more ground and reach remote viewing locations. Ice fishing is a traditional activity in many places, especially in Finland and Canada. And of course, there's skiing, snowshoeing, and ice skating. In Iceland, you can combine aurora viewing with visits to geothermal hot springs, including the famous Blue Lagoon. Imagine floating in warm water while watching the northern lights overhead. It's a magical experience.
I've heard that some places offer ice hotels too. Have you ever stayed in one?
I visited the ICEH Hotel in Jukkasjärvi, Sweden, though I didn't sleep there, I just toured it during the day. It's rebuilt every winter using ice from the nearby Torn River. Everything is made of ice. The walls, the beds, the furniture, even the glasses in the ice bar. The temperature inside stays around, 23 degrees F, and guests sleep in special thermal sleeping bags on ice beds covered with reindeer hides.
It sounds amazing but very cold. Is it comfortable to sleep there?
From what I've heard from people who did stay overnight, it's actually comfortable once you're in your sleeping bag, though going to the bathroom, which is in a separate heated building in the middle of the night, isn't fun. Most people just stay one night in the ice room as an experience, then move to normal warm accommodations for the rest of their trip.
Besides the cold, what other challenges might travelers face when seeking the northern lights?
The biggest challenge is simply the unpredictability. You can go at the perfect time of year, to the perfect location, with clear skies, and still not see them if solar activity is low. That's why it's important to plan other activities for your trip so you're not disappointed if the lights don't appear. Another challenge is the cold, as you mentioned. Winter temperatures in aurora viewing destinations can be extreme, often degrees C -4 degrees F or colder. Proper clothing is essential. Thermal layers, heavy-duty winter gear, insulated boots, and hand warmers can make the difference between an enjoyable experience and a miserable one.
How long do you typically need to wait when you're out aurora hunting?
That varies enormously. Sometimes the lights appear as soon as it gets dark and last for hours. Other times you might wait all night and see nothing or just a brief faint display. Patience is definitely required. Most guided tours last 3–4 hours, with guides choosing locations based on weather conditions and aurora forecasts to maximize your chances.
Speaking of guided tour, would you recommend them over trying to see the lights independently?
For first-time aurora hunters, I definitely recommend a guided tour, at least for the first night. Local guides know the best viewing locations away from light pollution, understand weather patterns, and often have networks of other guides who alert each other when displays begin. They also typically provide transportation, warm drinks, and sometimes even warm clothing and camera equipment. If you're staying several nights and get comfortable with the area, then self-drive aurora hunting can be rewarding too, especially if you rent a car and scope out good viewing spots during daylight hours. Just be aware that winter driving in these regions can be challenging with snow and ice.
That's good advice. What about cruises? I've seen Northern Lights cruises advertised.
Cruises along the Norwegian coast, particularly with the Hurtigruten line, are a popular way to see the northern lights. The advantage is that the ship can move to areas with clearer skies, and you're seeing beautiful coastal scenery during the day. Some ships even have Aurora alerts that will announce over the PA system or send a message to your cabin if the lights appear, even in the middle of the night. The disadvantage is that you're on a ship with light pollution, and it can be difficult to get good photographs from a moving vessel. But for travelers who want comfort combined with Aurora viewing, it's a good option.
Let's talk about some specific destinations in more detail. You mentioned Tromsø in Norway. Why is it so popular for Northern Lights viewing?
Tromsø is often called the Paris of the North and is one of Norway's most beautiful cities. It's located about 350 kilometers, 217 miles north of the Arctic Circle, putting it directly under the Aurora Oval. Despite being so far north, it has relatively mild temperatures due to the Gulf Stream winter averages around degrees C, 25 degrees F, which is warmer than many other Aurora destinations. The city offers a great combination of urban amenities and easy access to wilderness. You can take Aurora tour from the city, but Tromsø itself also has wonderful museums, restaurants, and the stunning Arctic Cathedral. Plus, during the polar night period from late November to mid-January, when the sun doesn't rise above the horizon, you have Aurora viewing opportunities throughout the day.
That sounds wonderful. What about Iceland? Why is it such a popular choice?
Iceland has become incredibly popular for several reasons. First, it's relatively accessible, with direct flights from many European and North American cities to Reykjavik. Second, the Gulf Stream keeps temperatures milder than you might expect. Winter temperatures in Reykjavik average around freezing, much warmer than places like Finnish Lapland. But the main attraction is that Iceland offers so much beyond the northern lights. Within a few hours' drive from Reykjavik, you can see geysers, powerful waterfalls like Gullfoss, black sand beaches, glaciers, and geothermal areas. The famous Blue Lagoon geothermal spa is just 20 minutes from Keflavik International Airport, making it easy to visit even on a short stopover.
Iceland has been on my travel wish list for years. What about Alaska? That seems like it would be a good option for American travelers.
Fairbanks, Alaska is arguably the best place in the United States for consistent aurora viewing. It's located under the Aurora Oval and has relatively stable winter weather with many clear nights. The University of Alaska Fairbanks even has a geophysical institute that issues aurora forecasts. There are several dedicated viewing areas around Fairbanks, like Chena Hot Springs Resort, which combines aurora viewing with the chance to soak in natural hot springs. And as you said, for American travelers, it doesn't require a passport or international travel, which can make it more accessible.
Are there any emerging destinations for Northern Lights tourism that people might not know about?
Abisko National Park in Swedish Lapland is becoming increasingly popular. It's located in a sort of microclimate that creates what locals call a blue hole, an area of clear sky even when surrounding areas are cloudy, which is ideal for aurora viewing. The Aurora Sky Station there has a viewing platform accessible by chairlift that puts you in a perfect position to see the lights. In Russia, Murmansk is the largest city north of the Arctic Circle and is starting to develop more tourism infrastructure for Northern Lights viewers. And in Canada, Yellowknife in the Northwest Territories boasts some of the highest aurora viewing success rates due to its position and clear winter skies.
It seems like Northern Lights tourism has really grown in recent years. Has that had any impact on these destinations?
Definitely, in many northern communities, aurora tourism has become a significant part of the local economy, creating jobs and business opportunities during what was traditionally the off-season. Places like Tromsø and Reykjavik have seen substantial growth in winter visitors, specifically coming for the northern lights. This has led to infrastructure improvements and more diverse tourism offerings. But it also brings challenges like ensuring sustainable development and managing the expectations of visitors who may not understand the unpredictable nature of the auroras.
That makes sense. For those who can't travel to these northern destinations, are there any alternatives for experiencing the northern lights?
There are some interesting alternatives. Planetariums and science centers sometimes offer northern lights shows that simulate the experience. There are also amazing films and virtual reality experiences being developed. But I think the most exciting alternative is the possibility of seeing them closer to home during periods of extreme solar activity. During major geomagnetic storms, auroras can be visible much further south than usual. There have been rare occasions when they've been seen as far south as Florida and Texas. Following aurora alert services can help you know when such rare events might make the lights visible in your area.
I'll definitely sign up for those alerts. As we start to wrap up our discussion on the northern lights, what would be your top 3 tips for someone planning their first aurora viewing trip?
First, plan your trip for at least 3-4 nights in the aurora zone, preferably more if your budget allows. This dramatically increases your chances of seeing the lights at least once during your stay. Second, don't make seeing the auroras the only purpose of your trip. Plan other activities and experiences you'll enjoy so your trip is fulfilling even if the lights don't make an appearance. And third, prepare properly for the cold with appropriate clothing. Being uncomfortable or even dangerously cold will ruin the experience, no matter how spectacular the lights show overhead.
Those are excellent tips. I would add that managing expectations is important too. Photos often show the northern lights more vividly than they might appear to the naked eye, especially when aurora activity is moderate rather than strong.
That's a great point. Cameras can capture colors that our eyes sometimes don't detect as well, especially the red end of the spectrum. To the naked eye, the lights often appear as shifting shades of green and white, with other colors becoming visible during stronger displays. It's still breathtaking, but it might look different from the highly saturated photographs you see in marketing materials.
Is there any particular northern lights experience that's still on your bucket list?
I'd love to see them from a completely different perspective, either from a glass igloo in Finland or from a hot spring in Iceland. And I'd love to experience a really powerful display with vibrant reds and purples, which I haven't seen yet in person. What about you? How are you planning your future Northern Lights trip?
I'm actually researching a trip to Iceland for next winter. I like the idea of combining the northern lights with exploring those incredible landscapes, waterfalls, geysers, glaciers, and volcanic features. And the fact that it's a relatively short flight from the east coast of the US makes it more accessible for a shorter vacation.
That sounds like a perfect first Aurora trip. The combination of natural wonders in Iceland is hard to beat, and even if the lights don't cooperate, you'll still have an amazing experience. Make sure to rent a car if you're comfortable driving in winter conditions. Having that flexibility to chase clear skies can really increase your chances.
Thanks for the tip. Well, I think we've given our listeners a comprehensive introduction to the Northern Lights, what they are, where to see them, and how to plan a trip to experience this incredible natural wonder.
And this is just the first of our 7 Natural Wonders series. In our next episode, we'll be discussing another breathtaking natural wonder, the Grand Canyon in the United States, which offers a completely different but equally awe-inspiring experience.
I can't wait for that discussion. The Grand Canyon is one of my favorite places on Earth. Until then, this is Sarah.
And Mike, encouraging you to keep exploring our amazing planet, whether it's chasing the dancing lights in the northern sky or discovering other natural wonders. Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.